You've been very vocal throughout this podcast and on a lot of content that I've looked about the importance of processes and having structure to this. A lot of people hear that and they're like, "Well, I want to remain creative and I want to remain innovative and stuff." So, how do you balance innovation with this idea of discipline while creating these systems so that you can have both?
I think the systems and processes allow you the freedom to innovate because you know that what needs to be done gets done. And then you have the ability to innovate and create new things for the business. So
Mm.
you can always try things and test things. I wouldn't say it hinders innovation at all. It gives you the freedom because if you look at it like this, like you don't know what you're doing, then all your innovation is kind of going to waste.
Welcome, Third Rock listeners, to the Branding Laboratory. I'm your host, Deevo, Chief Experience Officer for the brand Storyteller and the Fusion Creative Brands. And each week, I have the privilege of speaking with extraordinary leaders and entrepreneurs who are reshaping the way industries work. These conversations go way beyond the surface to explore the core philosophies, the lessons, and the challenges that define the brands that we admire today. And one of the greatest rewards of this podcast is the opportunity to share the insights of some of the brightest minds in business, people who are passionate about pushing boundaries and redefining what's possible. And as I always say, the stories we tell are the brands we build. And this show is a testament to the power of that concept. Let's dive in. In doing some research on you, your rise to success has been very meteoric and at a very young age. I think you're only 27 years old. So, first of all, congratulations. It's amazing. It's an inspiration to all entrepreneurs.
Thank
But
you.
if you could take me back for a minute, is there sort of a defining moment when you realized that entrepreneurship was going to be your true calling?
Yeah, there definitely was. So basically, kind of the journey that I took was a little bit, I would say, not or non-traditional. Basically, I started out working a couple different jobs, and for me, that was a really good learning experience. So I learned about all these different industries. I learned about all these different things that I could do, and the biggest problem in my life at that point was that I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I was like baffled by this thing. Like, how come everybody else knows what they want to do, but I don't know what I want to do? And so I had all these different directions that I could go into. And so over time, I realized that that's just an entrepreneur's mind. That's how you are as an entrepreneur. You're not married to one thing because you don't have just one skill. And I think that entrepreneurs can really tap into that and make the most of it. That's why you'll see people like even Elon Musk. I mean, he's jumping from company to company to company. Like, what is some dude that owns Twitter doing on the moon or on Mars, you know?
Yeah.
Like all these different things. He's making electric cars. He had PayPal, like all these different things. And that's, I think, an entrepreneur's mind. And so for me, it was partly a realization of that. So I wish I understood that a little bit better earlier on, or somebody told me that that was normal as an entrepreneur, because for me it was very frustrating. And so, like going through that process, we like I guess I had to learn different skills and basically find out what I didn't want to do. And so some jobs served to show me what I did want to do, some showed what I didn't want to do. And eventually I got to the point where I wanted a little bit more freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, geographical freedom, so I could travel, do what I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it, didn't have to look at the price. And so I realized that I was limited in that space if I had a job. And so that kind of brought me to the conclusion that I should probably be doing something on the side at least in order to supplement my income and have a little bit more freedom. And maybe one day I could make it my full-time thing. And so this kind of transition process happened when I was consulting for Microsoft. And so I was making, decent money and it was good and it was nice and it had benefits and a cool office and all that stuff. But at the same time, you're like really tied to that thing. And so if you want to go out and let's say you want to just go traveling next week, you can't really do that. You have to ask way in advance. If they give you permission, you can travel, like all these different things. And that just didn't really work well with me. Not that I necessarily wanted to rebel against the system. I get that it's a system for a reason. I implement systems like that in my own businesses. It just like didn't go or didn't align well with my plan for my life.
At what point in that trajectory, how long until you started to realize this is not really an alignment? I have this job, I'm making good money, I'm actually making an impact in the things that I'm doing. Was it a slow matriculation, or did you kind of like have an epiphany one morning? Where like, this is not the direction, this is not what I imagined my life to be?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if it was like one specific morning, but I do remember distinctly sitting in the office because my team was all remote. And so basically, I was here in Washington and everybody else was kind of across the US. I had a kind of a unique team situation. So I was really the only one. And so I always loved to work in the really big conference room that nobody else used. And if it's like 20 people, and so I just reserve it for myself. Or honestly, I wouldn't even reserve it. I just walk in, and if somebody needed it, they could have it. But I would work in the really big conference room because I loved the corner view and like all the good stuff about that room. And one morning I was sitting there, it was like a really rainy, gray morning, and I was like, what am I even doing here? Like nobody's here. I think it was like a particularly quiet Friday or something like that. Maybe people left for the holidays. It was around this time of year, actually, like in the fall, winter's time. So I think some people were out of office. It was like really dead and quiet. And I was like, what the heck am I even doing here? Like, I'm like one little piece of this giant puzzle because like even the building that I was working in, I was on the 24th floor, I believe, at 24th floor, 26th floor, something like that. And so it like just thinking through it, there's so many floors and there's so many cubicles and there's so many different people, and my little piece isn't even affecting anybody in this building. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, that's crazy, you know? And, you know, eventually I got really good at my job, so it became very efficient. And that's when the boredom kind of kicked in. So I was like, man, this is kind of boring. Like, I'm just sitting here doing the same thing.
Mm.
Nobody here even knows who I am, first of all. Second of all, like, it doesn't even affect anybody here locally. So I don't even get to see the impact of my work. And I think the lack of seeing the impact of my work, that's what really did it for me. And I was like, you know what? I really need to take this stuff I'm doing on the side more seriously. And so I started going all in on that after work. So basically,
At the time, what was that? Sorry, what was the side hustle you were working on?
I was doing a couple different things. So I was day trading,
Uh-huh.
the foreign exchange market. So trading Forex. I was manually trading. So my schedule was actually pretty crazy back then because meetings would start at like 7:30, 8 a.m. So I would come home. You can't really trade in the evening. You have to start trading around 11 p.m. So I'd start trading around 11 p.m. until 2 a.m. And I had figured, statistically speaking, the likelihood of a market move happening between 2 and 4 a.m. was very unlikely. So I took that time to sleep. So I'd trade from 11 to 2, sleep from 2 to 4, then I'd be up again at 3:59 to have the opening of the 4 a.m. candle. And I'd trade from 4 to 6. And then sometimes if I had a trade in before 6, I would take a little nap before heading to work. So it was a very crazy schedule, but I was like, man, if I could figure this part out, then I don't have to do this whole during the
Hmm.
day sitting around because now this became less exciting. You know,
Yeah.
my first like it's kind of funny. The thing that got me hooked on trading was a friend of mine showed me how to execute trades, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool, this is interesting, let me see if I could, you know, play around with it a little bit. So I did a little bit. It was a demo account, so not even real money. And then I had coffee with another friend who knew this person that showed me how to trade, and I was like, hey, check out what this guy showed me. And we were just sitting at Starbucks. It was the middle of the day, totally wrong time of day to trade, but I just executed a trade just to show him what would happen. And so I did. And again, I just began this whole journey. So I totally even forgot I placed the trade. Later that night, I was watching some courses on how to trade, and I opened my app and I'm like, whoa, I made like 2,500 bucks, like without doing anything. Imagine if I actually knew what I was doing. And so that's what really sparked the idea of like, okay, this is now very exciting and a lot more exciting than what I'm doing here during the day. So I started taking that very seriously at night. I'd be trading every night, sometimes staying up all night trading. And from there, I started going a little bit into like social media and building my brand. I started making these videos. Actually, I just did a talk in Dubai a couple weeks ago, and I showed the photos of my first video that I recorded from that Microsoft Office, actually. So I finished up work for the day and I was like, oh, hey, maybe I could just record a quick video. It's like 30 seconds long, but it's so bad, you
Yeah.
know? And I was just talking about my experience, like investing and like doing all these different things. And so, yeah, so I did the trading. I did a little bit of like Airbnb real estate.
Hmm.
And I did some crypto mining at that point. So I had bought like a couple miners or something like that.
Let me unpack that because there's a lot there that you just stated. Thank you. One of the
Sure.
things I have discovered, and you're no exception, is that most entrepreneurs sort of have this like innovative approach to everything and this creative, these creative sort of impulses to try different things. When you look back to yourself as a younger individual, I'm trying to understand sort of like your pedigree around this. Were your parents entrepreneurs? Did you have some really strong mentors as a kid? Like, how did you go from going the same path everyone else does, which is, get your degree, go to college, sit in a cubicle, whatever it is, and then somewhere retire at 65. You somewhere early on in the process saw that that was not going to be your trajectory. And I'm just wondering, was there an earlier inspiration around that?
A little bit. So for part of my childhood, my parents owned a business. So I kind of got to see a little bit of it, but I wouldn't say that inspired me. I just kind of understood a little bit more what business ownership actually looked like. And I had a very negative view of it, actually. I
Mm,
didn't think that it was going to be a good idea. I didn't really want to be a business owner. I wanted to be an investor. So
mm,
that kind of pushed me away from business ownership more into investing. And at that point in my life, I didn't really have too many mentors. Like now I do, but because I was intentionally pursuing these relationships with people who I know are way ahead of me and I can learn a ton from. So, now I have those people, but back then I didn't. And I was just kind of figuring it out on my own. And I think it's a good and a bad thing. So I was watching them from afar to see what's possible. So I think you need two types of mentors, by the way. So number one, you need somebody who's way ahead of you. He's light years ahead. You're like, wow, I want to be like this guy. I want to be like Warren Buffett. But you have no relation to Warren Buffett. Like you have literally nothing in common. So you need to find somebody who's like a couple steps ahead of you. Maybe somebody who began investing 5 years ago, and now you're like, oh, I want to become an investor. So they're not your like main mentor, but they're there to like kind of guide you down that path. And most of those guys are willing to mentor, by the way, because they've just gone through this journey of exactly what I'm going through. And so they can guide you step by step through that. And so the third person that I think that you need in your life is not really a mentor, but it's more of a colleague. So I started attending live events where I could see these super high level mentors, the people who started doing what I want to do 5 years ago, and then people who are maybe like 6 months ahead of me or like at the same level as me, because that gave me confidence. If I'm like, wow, all these people are doing this and it's working for them, that gave me confidence to show me what's possible. So you really don't know what you don't know. And
yeah.
so the more events that I attended, the more I got to see how many literally normal people are just they're crushing it in business and investing and doing all these things. And it's because it's not the person, it's the system. They're following a system. They're following a formula or a framework. And so a lot of times these super successful people will develop these frameworks and they'll create a community around it. And so they have a community of people winning. And so that really, really taught me a lot because I knew that I could also do it.
What does your formula look like?
So what I like to do is I like to diversify very aggressively at the beginning and go all in on a bunch of different things. As soon as something works, then you go really deep on that one thing. And so for me, that's worked because there's a very important thing to understand when you're just starting out. Most people complain about not having any money, not having any status, not having any network. Like, I think that's the perfect time to try things and fail because you literally have nothing to lose. You have no option except to succeed. You're not going to be any worse off than you are right now. You have nothing to lose.
Mhm.
So that was a huge thing for me because that allowed me to go all in on all these different things. And luckily, trading was one thing that worked out for me. And so I was able to go all in on these different things. And I also learned how to pivot at the right time. So let's say you start 10 different things, 5 different things, make it a little bit easier. You go all in on all these different things. So you're trying them, and then one of them or two of them work out. Great. Now you focus in on those things and you go deeper. But eventually, most things I've found is that they're really, really successful for a period of time, and then they get saturated or phased out or whatever. And then you have to transfer that into either a new investment, a new project, whatever it is, or something that is really like solid, like real estate or something like that. You're not going to get the same returns off stuff like that, but at least your money is protected and it's safe and it's growing strategically. So for me, I would say the formula is doing some research, learning what I could potentially be interested in doing and doing all of it all in because I have nothing to lose. Once something works, I double down on that and I see how far I can take it. When I see that it's kind of coming to an end or I can't grow that specific project any further, I move on to the next thing. So I need somebody who's maybe an operator that can run this business for me or run this project for me, and I move on to the next thing.
Are there flags on both sides of that equation when you're seeing, you said you're doubling down on something? What are some of the flags you look for on the double down opportunities? So you're starting to see revenue increase, greater opportunities. And then on the other side, when it's starting to dwindle out, what are some red flags around that so that you're able to sort of, and this is just a question, I don't even know if it's possible, but can you identify markers in that process as you've progressed through time?
Yeah, that's something that I had to learn in the last few years, actually, especially like when to stop, because that's kind of the hard part. It's like as an entrepreneur, you're always thinking positively. You're always like, oh, well, even if something goes wrong, I could turn it around or I
Sure,
could
sure.
fix it or it's going to be different next month or we'll recover next month, right? So you have to think about what is the actual big picture of whatever project you're working on. For example, let's say there happened to be a pandemic and you went into the personal protection like masks and gloves and all that stuff. It's like, okay, how long is this project potentially going to last? Big picture. You can't always just keep reinvesting and reinvesting and reinvesting and reinvesting. You kind of have to make a bet like, okay, maybe a year. So you
Mm,
go all in for a year and then you're like, okay, there's still profits on the table, but I'm okay missing out on it instead of reinvesting until I lose all my money.
mm,
So stuff like that versus something that's much longer term. It's like, okay, I want to invest into commerce and trade and I want to import and export things. That's going to be around forever. That's something that you could continue reinvesting into, stabilize it, and then have somebody run it for you. So some markers I would say is what I look for is number one, a special product, like I was mentioning earlier, a special product or service. It has to be something unique that isn't drowned out by the competition. Usually, if it's a product or service, people will try to copy it if it's good, and they'll kind of saturate the market, and it makes it more difficult to make a profit. So once you see those profit margins really dwindling, it might be time to move on to something else, or you got to get really, really creative with your marketing and acquisition and all that stuff. Another thing that I look for is a solid operator. So if I have somebody solid operating the business or I can find somebody solid, that's interesting to me. If I can't, I'm not interested in operating it. So maybe it's time for me to part ways with that project or that business or whatever it is. Because again, I'm not trying to create more jobs for myself. I'm trying to create freedom. And
mm.
the only way I can create freedom is if I have a solid product, a solid operator, and an opportunity for growth. And if one of those things starts getting out of the picture, I can try to resolve it, maybe give myself 3 to 6 months to fix it. If I can't, then maybe it's time to let go of that project.
This operator that you're bringing into the equation, is this somebody that's with you from the beginning, or is this somebody that once you start to matriculate and the business is making money that you start targeting someone to take over potentially if it's something you're going to stick with for the long haul?
Yeah, I have multiple layers of operators. So let's say I have a ice cream shop. I'm gonna have somebody running the ice cream shop because I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not gonna be there. And so let's say now I have an ice cream shop and I have a pest control company and a skincare salon and a real estate company and all these different things. I also don't want to manage my own portfolio, so I need an operator here. So there's an operator at the company level, and then there's an operator at the portfolio level because that's kind of your strategic team that is, helping you run this whole portfolio.
Hmm. Man, fascinating information. Thank you. You're a multimillionaire at 27 years old. What do most people get wrong about you when they hear that?
Mm, what do people get wrong about it? I don't know. I've had a lot of people assume that I came from wealth, and I had a rich family and that my dad gave me my Lambos, but he didn't.
That's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody similar to you, pretty young, made a lot of money in properties, real estate. He's now was doing real estate, and I was doing coaching. And I asked him a similar question, and he had a very similar response that people just jump to the assumption that I was handed this money, a silver spoon, all these sorts of things. But it's not. And really, he had similar stories to you. He had some failures, and entrepreneurs always talk about failure as a great teacher. Can you look back and look at the trajectory that you've taken? Do you see some things that have jumped out that taught you how to either pivot, make an adjustment to transform what was potentially a failure or an opportunity to learn something and into something greater?
Yeah. So one thing that I got kind of wrong was I tried to jump into passive ownership of a business or a project a little bit too early. And so I think there's definitely value. If I could go back and change this, I would. And that's being a little bit more involved in the operations of the company, and being more intentional. Now, of course, that was never my intention to start a business out of what I was doing, but that's kind of how everything played out. And so it became a business. But I was a little bit hesitant and resistant to running it. So I tried to just hand off everything to other people as opposed to being involved because I was the CEO. That was not the right move. If I
Mm.
had hired a CEO, that would have been okay. But I kind of wanted to do both, where I wanted to be the CEO and then also not actually run the company, which didn't work. So that was a huge learning lesson for me. And what I should have done in hindsight is either like just not run it as a company and just keep it small scale, not try to grow this thing. And the other option is I could have been more involved, right? So I could have been in the day-to-day operations a little bit more, keeping tabs on things, being involved in every part of the business, or stepping away and being like a chairman owner and having another CEO run the company. I wish I had done that and maybe even given somebody equity of the project, because that would have been their full-time role to run this business while I'm doing what I do best, which is not being CEO. I don't enjoy being CEO. I enjoy creating new relationships and bringing new opportunities to the table, but I need somebody else to execute on them because that's not how my brain works.
Explain that process to me because I run a business and I am by all means and orders CEO of my company. But I sort of had the same concept around I'm spending too much time operating in my business, like almost to the point where I sometimes feel like I'm working for my business.
Mhm.
So if someone like me, who's a smaller entrepreneur, wanted to diversify that operationally and hire a CEO, what does that look like? Do you mind sharing some of your insights on that?
Yeah, so actually, I took this whole experience and I implemented this into my consulting firm right now, where we place CEOs and operators and even fractional COOs and stuff like that into companies. And so basically, people who are in like the $2 to $5 million range, they're exactly in the position that you're in. They're trying to run everything. They can't really afford to hire a COO or a CEO to help them with the operations. But really, what it looks like is you are the strategic mind behind the company. Now, some people are founders and CEOs, but the fact is, most people are not. They're just not built to be a CEO. They're a founder. They're a visionary. They have the ideas. You have the relationships. You're creating new strategies of how you want to run your business. But the fact of the matter is, somebody still has to execute on it every single day. And I know that just drives my mind crazy to do the exact same thing every day. That's why I left Microsoft.
Hmm.
So it literally makes no sense for me to try to do it. I thought being a CEO would be different, but it became very similar. Once you implement systems and processes, it becomes very monotonous, really. Every day looks almost the same. And so what I'm good at is like I'm going to go speak at an event and create 10 new relationships that could be super valuable partnerships. And nobody else in my company can do that but me. But I can't also in the same day have 10 team meetings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like for me, it's kind of a balance right now of doing all these business development activities, which are very important. And I'd say the most important part of the business. Without it, it doesn't exist,
Hmm.
or the business dies. And then secondly, I'm balancing my time to do some of the operations, but I've really been strategic about building a strong team around me and having a COO and all those different parts and being very specific with assignment of departments. So instead of just assigning tasks, I assign whole departments to people. I have a department head and then I have people under them and stuff like that. And it seems to be working pretty well. But for the most part, I'd say almost every entrepreneur can increase their income by hiring a COO or CEO.
So, dude, a lot of the stuff that you're dropping right now is very innovative for, forgive me for saying, as immature into your career as you are at 27 years old. How do you have all of this knowledge? No joking aside, like how did you know all this sort of like this idea of, I mean, this is really innovative, this idea between founder and CEO and having the wherewithal to understand, the big picture in that and being able to sort of take the micro macro and see all those different levels. Like, dude, that's like next level shit. So how, I mean, how did you pick up and acquire this sort of skills and knowledge to sort of engineer what you've done so far at such a young age?
Well, I wish that somebody just taught me this stuff, but unfortunately, I had to fall on my face and learn it myself.
Yeah.
I'm telling you this because, like, even the whole founder and CEO thing, I was the founder. I was great as a founder. As soon as I went into CEO, we made a lot of money that year. Like we grew the company within 6 months, we were making over 1 million a month.
Mm.
And that kind of insane growth is just way too fast for somebody who's not prepared to be a CEO. But I was like, well, it's working, right? All the numbers, the KPIs say it's working, everything else is working. But on the backside, it's like, okay, we're struggling to run this effectively. And I thought that I could step into that role and I would enjoy it. But I realized the further along we got, it just became more and more complex, more and more complicated. I realized that I don't even like doing this. Just hand it off to a CEO. And so that created some conflict in the company. And eventually, like there were multiple failures that happened because of that. And so because I was not willing to let that go, that was a painful experience for me, and so that's why today I can sit here and tell you like it's not the same role. I experienced it myself. I know that feeling of wanting to be a founder and not wanting to be CEO.
Yeah, I struggle with that as well. Just having been in the business for a while as an entrepreneur, the whole idea of, and not that I would say that my day is the same task 2 days in a row, but there is a lot of redundancy, and I'm trying to manage that with people within my organization. But I've always been sort of fascinated. I've never been able to put into words. So thank you. This idea of founder and CEO, and sort of like somebody who's actually running the company and somebody who's inspiring the company. So like they are definitely two different distinct roles. Another thing that I'm impressed with you is you sort of, and this is one of the things that I help people with, which is I know how difficult it can be, is you have an empire, you have an organization. You mentioned, being the CEO and the company. You have this company, but you've also done a really good job of building this personal brand around your name, Austin Zelan and stuff. Tell me a little bit about that and the dichotomy of where the company ends and the personal brand begins.
So the reason that I decided to go into a personal brand, and this was just my hunch, my theory, like 10 years ago, whenever I downloaded Instagram, yeah, 2014. So it was my hunch that it would be easier to build a personal brand, and I didn't even know what a personal brand was back then, actually. So the first few years, I was just posting, and my
Mm,
profile was growing because I was posting like travel pictures and stuff
yeah,
like that. That was popular back then. So my profile grew a little bit, and then I realized that I potentially had something valuable. I was like, okay, I had maybe like, I don't know, 10,000 followers or 20,000 followers. I was like, okay, maybe like these people would want to do something together with me. Maybe we could collaborate on a project, or like I had some like level of influence over this audience. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like maybe if I grow up big enough and I have millions of followers, I could do like partnerships with brands and like all these different things because for me, it was a potential to um, grow my influence online and then use it for whatever company I was running at that time. And so I didn't come to that realization right away, of course, but over time, as I built it, I realized that there are pros and cons. So building a personal brand, I think, is easier. You can build it a lot faster. And I have the flexibility of like, 2 years ago, I was doing this, and today I'm doing this, but I'm still the same person. And the quality of output that I put out is associated with whatever company I'm running. I can run 10 companies right now, and they're all associated with me. And that's the benefit of it. So, if you're building a brand that's not a personal brand or like just a business, it's a little bit harder to do. But then you have the flexibility of like, I'm not attached to that brand. I'm not living in a glass house, so to speak. Like, if, you know, it's a very different experience, and you can have somebody else run it for you. So the cons is that if you have a personal brand, you have to run it yourself. You have to do all those things, and you can have help, but for the most part, you're kind of the dancing bear here.
for
And if
sure.
you don't exist, your brand doesn't exist.
And you've monetized your personal brand?
Yeah.
I guess just so I have a better understanding. So your monetization of that would be around your keynotes, your workshops, things of that you're doing, or just the brand itself in terms of how much traffic you're driving to your social, your YouTube, et cetera, or both?
So a little bit of both. So I use it to drive traffic to my businesses, number one. But second of all, I charge for keynotes.
Hmm.
So I charge 25K to speak at an event, plus travel costs and stuff like that. And then on top of that, I'm able to leverage it to host events like in partnership with people and stuff like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So it's been really valuable in that sense. But yeah, I mean, it's very monetizable. That's the
In
cool.
terms of your keynotes, if someone that was listening to the show wanted to hire you, what are some of the bread and butter topics that you talk about?
I would say the biggest things for me is business growth and business scaling at this point. So I talk about AI implementation, creating systems, standardizing a lot of the processes in the company. Because, like you mentioned earlier, most people feel like they're working in the business, not on the business. And the only
Yeah.
way you can escape that is by building a solid system and building something that works with or without you. You need to build an engine. It's like a car. If you build an engine, the engine works whether you're sitting in the car or not. You don't
Mhm.
have to be in there, doing something. The engine will just work. And so how can we create that engine in a business?
You said scaling, and that's sort of one of the marquee notes when businesses fail is when they try to scale or scale too fast or scale too big or just not understand how to scale. In your experience now working with businesses and growing the multiples of your own, what are some of what is one marquee piece of advice that you could tell entrepreneurs about beginning to scale?
I think it starts firstly, the first $10 million, they should be running the company. So until they get to $10 million in revenue, you can start hiring maybe an operations person, probably not a COO or a CEO, around the $5 million mark. So somewhere within, I'd say 3 to 5 million, you can start doing that. That's a huge thing that will take things to the next level. But for the most part, it's just adding structure. Like you can accidentally make $2 million. That's not hard. You just have to have a product that went kind of viral and people like it and there's enough demand for it. Boom, you made $2 million. That's beginner level business. So once you're at that level, it's like, okay, how can I grow it to the next level? But because these businesses are operating so inefficiently, they're not able to get there and they don't have the money to pay for the things that they need, even though like they're trying to grow. And so a lot of times you'll see these people, I mean, they'll net like 200K a year, 300K a year, and they're just kind of like working their butt off 80 hours a week, which is fine if that's what they want. But if they really want to grow to the next level, if they want to scale it, they need to build a system behind their business. So it's really just adding structure to what they have. They have the product, they have the clientele, they probably have a decent operator, and now they just need to add structure to the whole thing to allow it to breathe and grow and develop. Then once you get to the 10 million mark, 10 to 15 million, you're going to have to look at your leadership. The leadership that got you to 10 to 15 million is not going to get you to 25 million. So now you got to think about, okay, who is on my team? Who are my directors? Who are the people that are working with me? And then once you have the right leadership, then you grow to the next level.
You've been very vocal throughout this podcast and on a lot of content that I've looked about the importance of processes and having structure to this. A lot of people hear that and they're like, well, I want to remain creative and I want to remain innovative and stuff. So how do you balance innovation with this idea of discipline while creating these systems so that you can have both?
I think the systems and processes allow you the freedom to innovate because you know that what needs to be done gets done. And then you have the ability to innovate and create new things for the business. So
Mm.
you can always try things and test things. I wouldn't say it hinders innovation at all. It gives you the freedom because if you look at it like this, like you don't know what you're doing, then all your innovation is kind of going to waste.
Mm.
So if, for example, you own a burger joint and every single time a customer comes in, the burger is made a little bit different. People love it, it's great, but every burger is a little bit different. But now you can't innovate and you can't test. Well, do they like onions on it? Do they like this sauce? Do they like cheese? Do they not like cheese? Like all these different things. Do they like chicken or just a burger? Like all these different things can be tested and should be tested, and that's how you grow the company. But you can't do that if you don't even know what like the standard operating procedure is. Once you have a standard, once you have a baseline, then you can innovate. It's like, oh, well, we tried sesame buns instead of regular.
Mm.
Those like increased our revenue because they're cheaper and more people like them. So, all these different things, you need the structure in order to be able to innovate. It's kind of like guidelines. Like we create all these things, but it has to align with our core values, our mission, all these different things.
So the systemization of it itself is the innovation that leads. So the systemization of it is which leads to the consistency, and the consistency is what enables you to have innovation.
Exactly. Yeah, because if you're inconsistent in your business and it's not stable, I think
Hmm.
that's even more important, the stability of the business. If the business is not stable, you shouldn't be innovating.
Hmm. I think a lot of people, you said something earlier about, the 2 million. It's easy to make 2 million, and then you get to 5 million. I think a lot of times I see this in the entrepreneur world is people get stuck because they become satisfied with that. So they made millions of dollars and, maybe that was a goal of theirs. And then you sort of just see the business sort of like take a static baseline from that point forward. How do you stay curious? How do you challenge yourself on a consistent basis to not only stay innovative and creative, but come up with new ideas and not become sated with what you have?
I think it's just a little bit of how my mind works. Like, I love new projects and trying new things and having a greater and greater impact with every year of my life, which I'm just getting started, but for me, that's what drives me and drives curiosity. And I think if you're impact minded and impact driven, then you're not satisfied because it's like, okay, well, I mean, think about it. Like, if you want to have impact and you want to always have more impact, then if you make $1 million, you're only making $1 million worth of impact. What if you could make $10 million worth of impact or $100 million worth of impact? It just gives you the freedom to positively affect more people's lives. And so that's a huge driver of mine, that I want to always have more impact. And if you're always driven by that desire to have impact, I don't think you get stagnant.
In terms of the impact itself, I imagine you have a lot of entrepreneurs that follow you on social media and then a bunch of taking your workshops and your courses. Do you have advice that you give them from time to time that they probably don't want to hear but are necessary for them to grow?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely some things that kind of resonate with a lot of these people. For the most part, I would say the biggest one is that people just really aren't dreaming big enough. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's actually so true. I remember when people used to tell me that when I was like young, they were like, "Oh yeah, just dream big," and it sounds so like fake and not real, but it's actually so real. Like, if I could go back in my life and do one thing more, is just dream bigger. Because if my goal was to make $1 million and I failed, I would have made maybe 500K or 700K. But if my goal was to make $100 million, it's the same time that's going to pass. It's the same path that I'm going to take. But if I fail at $100 million, maybe I'll still make 80 million. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just a whole different, like, I'm just thinking in different terms. And the cool thing about that is that it's kind of like wearing opportunity sunglasses, I call them. So you put on these sunglasses, and if you have the $100 million sunglasses on, that's all you see. Like, if you really put that in your mind, like, my goal is to find an opportunity that makes $100 million a year. Everything that comes your way, you're not even fazed by somebody telling you, "Hey, do you want to, flip this house with me?" Like, you're like, "What? It doesn't make 100 million. It doesn't even make sense to you. Your mind doesn't accept it because your frame of mind is 100 million." So all these opportunities are simultaneously out there. But if your frame of mind is on the $100 million mark, that's what you're seeing and that's what your mind is accepting. It's kind of like you bought a red car, now all you see is red cars,
Yeah.
So same thing with business. If I was dreaming bigger, I would have had more success. If I have the $1 million sunglasses on, I'm seeing things that can make me $1 million. And that's cool if that's my goal. But if it's not my goal, then it doesn't make sense. So you need to look at your overall goal and dream as big as you possibly can. And then secondly, doing things with discipline, because excitement runs out. You're excited for 6 months, maybe. Like, it's exciting. You're like, "Oh, this is awesome." And I want to do this. Motivation runs out. Some days you wake up, you're not motivated, you're not excited, you're not passionate about what you're doing, but discipline is always there. Discipline is there consistently. So sometimes you need to lean in on the discipline. Like, a lot of us here in Seattle, like, we have really, really short days in the winter. Like, right now it gets dark at like 4:30 p.m. and it's like super like cold and rainy and like gray and all this stuff. And it's just not motivating to work. Like, I'm not motivated to work, but I'm disciplined. Or like, I'm not motivated to go to the gym super early in the morning in this cold, but I'm disciplined and I go every single day. So sometimes you have to lean in on that discipline, and then you start with excitement, you start with motivation, but that's more like in phases.
In terms of the systematizing things, have you been able to systematize your big dreams and a process you have around that? Whether, people talk about vision boards and writing down in journals and setting all these different goals and intentions. Have you systematized that process for yourself?
Yeah. So the way that I do it is I come up with the biggest goal that I can possibly make. So let's say I want to make $100 million. I would write down that goal. So I want to make 100 million, and I break it down into smaller pieces, because obviously you're not gonna, like, don't shoot for home runs. Like, the likelihood of a home run happening is not that high. So
Mm.
I'd rather have, let's say, $10 million businesses that can compile my $100 million business, which is a lot easier. Now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, I could literally get involved in a bunch of different opportunities and grow these businesses to $10 million, and that would be my 100 million. So working backwards really works for me. So what does that look like? If in 10 years I want to make 100 million, what is that per year? So what is that per month? What is that per week? And understanding task wise. So that's financial is one thing, but then it's like, okay, how many tasks need to be done or how many things need to be happening in order for me to make 100 million? And so breaking it down backwards to what can I do today? What can I do this week? What can I do this month in order to get closer to that goal? And so making it tangible, that's what really works for me. And it's easier in some industries, it's harder in others. Like if, again, going back to a burger joint, how many burgers do I need to fry up every day in order to make 100 million? And then working backwards of like, okay, so if one location can do this many, I need to have 20 locations, and then
Mm.
20 locations need to be doing this per month. And so working it all the way down to like a daily or a weekly level. So I know what I do today. I'm like, okay, well, to get to my goal intentionally, this is what I need to make happen today. And then is your second assessment of your goal. Do I really want to go through this? Like, do I really want to do all these tasks today and do this consistently and do this with discipline for the next 5 to 10 years in order to achieve this goal? Maybe not. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I don't want to be in the burger business. So I think it's your opportunity to not only plan it out strategically, but also assess whether you're actually passionate enough about it to be involved with it.
I hear a lot of self-awareness in that answer. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of introspection and sort of thought process through this, pragmatically thinking about, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, where does my true power lie, and stepping into that space.
Yeah, exactly. I think everybody has a unique advantage. And if you're not tapping into your unique advantage, like you are not, you're missing out. You're definitely putting it to waste.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot of people, even people in my program, like they'll come in and they're like, oh, yeah, my dad used to own this mechanic shop for 40 years and I used to work with him, but I want to get into like real estate. I'm like, dude, like, why don't you just like own a mechanic shop? Like there's people going out of business who would give you their mechanic shop if you give them 20% of their profits in their retirement. Like that's a reality. And why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you tapping into this huge resource that you have in your dad and your family and your experience in the mechanical world? And you're trying to go do something over here. Do that later. If you're excited about that, do that later. But you need something that cash flows for you.
So sort of like baseline leverage at first.
Yeah, because everybody has something like that. And most
Mm.
people ignore it. They're like, oh, well, cars don't excite me. So I want to go into yachts. I want to rent yachts. Okay, that's great. You can do that. But the lift to do that is going to be like this big. Whereas over here, you have all the resources. You worked in a mechanical shop. You watched your dad do it for 40 years or maybe 20 years.
Hmm.
Maybe your dad is still around. He can help you out with it. What if you just took equity in a mechanical shop and started making some cash flow here to fund your passion project over here? And then
Hmm.
you decide whether it's actually worth it. So people like skip out on their strengths sometimes in order to go for something that they're passionate about. And that's fine, but I don't know if that's the wisest thing to do.
That's an interesting insight. I want to ask you some personal questions just to get to know you a little bit in terms of before we close out, if I can. In terms of this is a question I hear a lot of people sort of like skirting the issue and they try to reframe it, this whole idea of defining happiness and fulfillment. And when you take a look back when this is all said and done, do you have sort of your own KPIs or metrics that you're going to look back and say and reflect upon, I was able to accomplish this, I had these dreams, I had these goals. How are you at this point? I know you're young, but thinking just let's go from now to 0 to 27 and you look back and sort of say, am I successful? Am I fulfilled? What does that look like for you philosophically? What does that actually mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, what brings happiness in my life is a couple different things. So number one, I am involved with a lot of like nonprofit organizations and stuff like that, and that's a huge part of my life. Secondly, um, is helping other people achieve their dreams. So whatever it's through, whether it's helping them grow their business or helping them with, their personal life, like whatever. I don't really do much on the personal life actually, but more on the business side or like investments and showing them the things that I've done and stuff like that and helping them in that space is really fulfilling for me. And then the third thing, and I don't know, maybe it's kind of a selfish one, but like for me, what makes me happy is knowing that I gave it my all, knowing that I couldn't have done more. And so whether that's going all in risk-wise on a project that I really want to be a part of, or
Mhm.
maybe it's going, full speed on a new business, like whatever it is, I want to know that I gave it my all because that is what makes me happy. If I look back, things that I regretted is when I didn't work hard enough, I wasn't all in on it, and I knew I could have done more.
Hmm.
And so what makes me happy is like knowing I can look back at the last year and like, man, I really gave it my all. Like
Mhm.
nothing left, and that's what makes me happy. And for some people, maybe it's going on 10 vacations a year, but for me, it's knowing that I couldn't have done more because I achieved the maximum of my potential. So it's kind of like potential achievement, I guess, or
Mhm.
potential fulfillment.
Mhm. When you have children, it doesn't really matter, boy or girl. If you had one piece of wisdom to impart upon them, and you can just hand this to them, and then that's it. You've talked a lot about discipline and systems and working hard and all those things. What would you say as a father to your young child? This is the gift I'm giving you. I just dropped my daughter off at college. I think when we first spoke, I don't know if I told you that she's a freshman in college, and one of the
Mhm.
most surreal moments of my life, outside of the day she was born. And I'm just thinking, okay, did I do enough to prepare this kid for being on her own? Like, have I done my job as a father? Have I been able to give her some sense of purpose and wisdom so that like I can say, all right, I'm not going to be here. You're going to go do your own thing. And I just, those are the thoughts that ruminated through my head as I drove 5 hours home.
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that I would share with my child is that you can really control a lot more than you think. And it's not from the control perspective, but like a lot of your life is in your hands. Like the way that you designed it, the way that your life is right now is just the choices that you made 6 months ago and 9 months ago and 12
Mhm.
months ago. And so life doesn't happen to you unless you let it. If you let life happen to you, it'll happen to you. But you also can wake up and be like, this is intentionally the life that I'm creating, and I'm not negotiating. No matter how hard it is, I'm going for this because that's what I want. And so that's one thing that a realization that really helped me in my life because I thought my life was happening to me. I was like, oh man, like this happened or that happened and that happened. And then at one point I was like, wait a minute, like if I didn't do this, this, and this, that wouldn't have happened. Or if I didn't do this, this, and this, that wouldn't have happened. So how can I create the life that I intentionally want, whether it means me working 1 hour a day or me working 80 hours a day. That's all my decision. Those are all my plans and my choices and me strategically placing things in my life to achieve that. So I think it's the relentless pursuit of that. Because it is achievable and you can literally do anything. The more I travel, the more people I meet, like some of these people have crazy lives. And I'd say the happiest ones are the ones who realize this thing and they're like, I can design my life to be exactly like this. And then they work for 2, 5, 10 years and they create it and they enjoy their life.
Instead of being accidentally driven
Yeah.
by someone else's outside factors. That was one of the primary reasons you talked at the outset of the call why I walked away from the corporate. I did that for 15 years, and 15 years it seems like a lifetime now looking back. But I just remember sort of thinking, and this was my epiphany moment, not to rehash it, but I had been in the conference room, same conference room that I always like to go work in. Like I always found this nice juicy corner office that nobody ever used, and sometimes I
Yeah.
got in trouble for it. People are like, "Who the fuck does dude think he is working in the conference room all the time?" I just liked the view, man. It overlooked like the ocean. It was really
Same
cool. I was
here.
in San Diego. I was like, I don't want to sit in a fucking cubicle, man. So anyway, I just remember thinking I was in the conference room for that week, and I don't know why, but it was like an inordinate amount of birthday celebrations that week, where like everybody piles into the stupid conference room and everybody has their cupcakes. And I just remember thinking, is this really the life that I want to do for the rest of my life? It was like borrowing a conference room and having to sing happy birthday to somebody that I never even met before. Just like this doesn't seem like the right trip for me.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship, man, I will say this, and I'd like to get your take on it. For me, it's been, I don't know, sometimes it's a really lonely road. And being able to, and one of the things I've really focused on the last few years is trying to find people that I can surround myself. So I go to a lot of workshops, I go to retreats, I belong to masterminds, just people who are sort of operating in the same tune that I am, the same vibrational level. What do you do? To sort of keep yourself balanced, building your empire, but still maintaining these deep personal connections that we need as humans?
Yeah, so for me, because my business has grown fairly quickly, I've had to kind of change out that group multiple times. And not that I don't want to be friends with the people before, but I just needed people who were a couple steps ahead of me.
Yeah,
And so I think it's a combination of two things. You have these father figures in your life who are mentors and stuff like that, and that's very, very important. I keep them very close. But then I also have these people who are like at my level or a couple steps ahead.
yeah,
And so these are the colleagues that I'm, doing business with and chatting with and all that. And so for me, that connection is very valuable because it can be lonely. That's true, but it's only lonely if you allow it to be lonely. Like you could build a whole community around it. Like
sure.
later today, actually, I have my networking event. I decided that I didn't have enough of a community in Seattle, so I started doing monthly networking events. I pay for all the food and the drinks and everything, and I invite people sometimes over into my building, sometimes into the Lamborghini dealership here. So I'll host these networking events, and I'm building a community of people who are like-minded entrepreneurs, CEOs, that type of stuff, because that community is very important.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. I said I was feeling very lonely, so I was like, I need to proactively go out and find something to fill this space because I just noticed that my circle. It's interesting, and I think some people don't understand that. You do have to change your circles over time, like, and there is an evolution to that. One of the things, and this is a personal question, I have not been able to find a mentor, and I have actively been sort of putting this out in the universe. Obviously, not looking in the right places, but I'm looking for. You talked about this older individual that's seasoned and has been there and has done that and has lived the life that I would imagine I would want to live. How do you find someone like that?
I don't know. Actually, there's a there's a few different ways because I found my mentors all in different ways. And a couple of them, like they came to my podcast as a guest. I was just inviting people that I look up to. A couple of them came to my podcast. A couple of them I met in different masterminds. I would say probably the best way to do it is to go to like a super high level mastermind, but it can't be like one of these like flashy new
Yeah,
masterminds. It's,
yeah,
hey, we're gonna double your, ROAS or something. It's like it's got to be something that's like, a little bit of the older school, like they don't have any marketing about the mastermind, but it's like an inner circle type of thing. And there's even like YPO and stuff like that where you'll find a lot of these super legit guys. But yeah, I'd say that's a great way to find these people. And for me, it's been a combination of everything. It's been a little bit of that. It's been a little bit of like one of my mentors, John Maxwell. So I used to, in college, I had to write book reports on his books. Like it was crazy. And then all of a sudden I find myself speaking at the same event as him. And I was like, wow, like what a crazy situation. And so I talked to him and I was like, hey, like I used to write book reports on your books. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And so I chatted with him a little bit and now he's one of my mentors and has really spoken a lot into my life. And finding these people that you really resonate with, it can't just be like just a mentor for the sake of mentor. You
mhm,
find people that you connect with and that are kind of on the same wavelength as you.
yeah.
I think that's very important in a mentor because if they don't understand you, like it's just not going to work.
Man, what a good conversation, Austin. I'm really glad you came back on. And sorry about the first one for those of you who are wondering why, because we had advertised you coming on the show. We just had a
Yeah.
bad recording, so we had to redo this again. I really appreciate it. So the things you're doing now, if people wanted to work with you or see you, like what's the best? So you're doing mentoring yourself now, you're doing coaching now, you're doing, can
Yeah.
you talk about a few of the things that you're doing right now and how people might benefit from getting to know you?
Sure. Yeah. So I do mentoring and coaching and stuff like that. I have a one-on-one mentorship program right now where I help people, first of all, develop their personal brand. So it's kind of like a three-part thing. Number one, they develop their personal brand. Second of all, if they have an existing business or project or whatever, I help them structure it and scale it. And then thirdly, we set up a seven-figure business for them. So by the end of 12 months, they have a seven-figure company that's making at least, what is it, 334 per month in gross revenue. And yeah, so that's the whole point of the program. That's a one-on-one. And then we also have like consulting that we do for businesses. So there kind of splits off into two things. Number one is for people who want to improve their systems and operations and stuff like that. We can place a fractional COO or CEO. We can place somebody full-time. Usually full-time is better, but for some startups, fractional is good. And then we also have an AI implementation program. So it's called the AI Business Growth Blueprint, where we take a look at their company, we do a full audit of everything, and then we help them implement AI into their business. So exactly which tools they should be using, how they should be using them, how they should implement them, and we show them how those tools can make them 100K within their first 90 days. So that's the whole point of that consulting project. And then we deliver a huge audit. It's usually like 20, 30 pages. So
Man, we talked a lot about our stuff today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your lessons and your philosophies and all the things that have driven your success. It's going to be a really good show for a lot of entrepreneurs, and I appreciate you being candid and just kind of sharing a lot of your insights. Any closing thoughts? Best place for people to find you?
yeah, Instagram is going to be the best. So it's at Austin Zelan, AustinZelan.
I'm really digging your backdrop, by the way.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
really
you.
cool. Austin, thank you, man. I appreciate your time and just a good show, all in all.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man.
Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Branding Laboratory. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media for more branding tips and insights. And remember, your story matters. Until next time, keep building and sharing your unique brand story. I'll see you soon.